Hello, everybody. My name's Jason Gay. I'm a senior cloud consultant here at Mission, and we're an Amazon Premier Consulting Partner. I'm joined by Andrew Kloman, a Partner Solutions Architect on Amazon Web Services and User Computing Team. And today we're going to be discussing Amazon Workspaces and how to transition to a remote workforce, which is top of mind for most companies right now among this COVID-19 crisis. Also, you're going to see on the right-hand side of your BrightTalk window that we have a data sheet on Amazon Workspaces, so be sure to download and review that as well. Before we get started, let's share a little bit about me. I am a 20-year industry veteran. I got my start as a Windows admin. Over the past few years, I've been with Mission for about 6 years now. Over the past few years, I've become an AWS cost management guru, and in my free time, I thoroughly enjoy making homemade ice cream with my children. My latest concoction this weekend was a strawberry banana. Came out fantastic. Andrew.
Yep. Hey, everyone. I'm Andrew Kloman. I'm a Partner Solutions Architect and the Global Technology Lead for End User Computing Partners. So I work with system integrators like Mission, as well as ISVs in this space. I got my career started at a little place in Maryland, actually, starting an internet service provider, a wireless-based one. Had my fair time at Citrix 2 different times, a couple of desktop as service startups, and I've been here at Amazon for the last 3.5 years now. A little bit more of a personal side. There's me on the left with my Volkswagen van that I adore. It's one of my best friends kind of thing. Me and my husband drive around in it, travel the country. There's us in Palm Springs. So lots of road trips, lots of camping, lots of fun with that.
Very cool. Thank you much, Andrew. Well, we're happy to have you here in our webinar today. Before we get into the meat of the presentation, I wanted to share a little bit more information about Mission. So, who is Mission? We are an AWS Premier Consulting Partner and Managed Service Provider. We were formed by bringing 3 AWS consulting partners together and combining our forces to offer a more comprehensive set of services to our customers. We've got a strong focus on cloud architecture and design, migrations to the cloud, and ongoing management and optimization of our customers' AWS environments. Now let's review the agenda for today's presentation, and we'll get started. So today we are going to go through end-user computing modernization. We're going to talk about Amazon Workspaces. That's going to be the meat and potatoes of this presentation. We'll go through an overview of it as well as some of the benefits. We'll talk about network considerations in regards to deploying workspaces, directory service requirements, bundle management, client configuration, and toward the end, we'll review a case study on how Mission has helped a customer of ours, AltaView, leverage Amazon Workspaces. We'll do some Q&A, and then we'll wrap things up. Andrew, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks. So, enterprises going through EUC modernization. How do we see that at AWS? Right? So, in short, end-user computing is end users accessing their applications and their data, while admins are able to provide that in a secure and cost-efficient manner. We see a lot of enterprises find it very difficult to manage endpoints, traditional endpoints, and the cost around those traditional endpoints. Moving to a desktop as a service provides a familiar end-user experience, while being able to provide the end user a choice of their endpoint device. Admins also get to provision this in a secure, elastic, and cost-efficient manner. So being able to bring your own device, being able to have the security that you may need for compliance with whatever industry you may be in, all doing this in a cost-efficient way. We'll go into some of those details in a bit. There we go. So from an AWS perspective, Amazon Web Services, right, we have lots of different options. We're not single-threaded here. We have partner solutions as well as our own AWS managed services, like we'll go into with Amazon Workspaces. To this point, this is a common thing within Amazon as a whole company, not just with Amazon Web Services. If you're familiar with Netflix and with Amazon Prime, we have, Netflix runs on AWS. That service provider provides awesome shows like Stranger Things. It's an awesome, cool retro show there. Amazon Prime has things like Mrs. Maisel, super cool, 1950s, 60s comedian thing. One of my favorite shows this past year. But you could see those as differentiators, right? And those differentiators through and through within the company are aligned with our partners. So the differentiators we see for our partner solutions are things like customers looking to lift and shift that experience from on-premises into AWS while providing continuity of experience, meaning, from an end user's perspective, you're using the same tools, you're using the same maybe images. And from an end user perspective, they're not having to change the endpoint client installation maybe. But from an AWS managed services like Amazon Workspaces, you're moving further up the stack on what's being managed and provided to you as a consumer. Also, one of the big things here too is the pay-as-you-go model. So instead of having to have 3-year contracts or buying large pieces of hardware on premises and having to live through that life cycle, you can simply spin up a desktop with Amazon Workspaces and pay for only what you need for the exact time that you need it for. Great scenario for some of the stuff that we've been dealing with recently. And to that extent, with desktop as a service providers, companies want to focus on just what they manage, what their business is meant to be doing, right? And not have to worry about the IT part of it. So, on the right-hand side, you have that whole stack, right? I'm not going to list all those things, but there's a lot of things that are required to set up a desktop as a service and a VDI environment. With Amazon Workspaces and data solutions, you really only have to focus on managing the image and the directory services. So, users and computers, Microsoft Active Directory per se, and the image management, maybe the applications, and we'll go into that a little bit as well. So working up that stack, that's a common thread that you see within Amazon Web Services, is being able to provide further up the stack solutions for our customers. Some of the other big benefits that we see from enterprises moving to AWS is agility. So again, like the kind of crisis that we're in here, being able to spin up desktops super quickly, get your business back into business without, people having to come into the office, with all the things that are going on. Breadth of functionality, 175 featured services, anything from things like GPUs, high-end graphics processing units for 3D applications, or there's tons of other things like ground control that does satellite communication. I don't know anything about that, but we have a huge amount of breadth of functionality. Cost efficient, already talked about kind of the pay-as-you-go model there. And our global reach, again, within AWS, spanning 69 availability zones, 32 regions. In the VDI context of that, being able to pit that desktop closest to the end user or closest to that application backend, depending on your use case, is really important. And having that, that footprint is very important to our customers. All right, diving into Amazon Workspaces. So again, secure, pay-as-you-go, simple to deploy and manage, scalable, performant. So to throw that out there again, with the COVID-19 that we're dealing with right now, a lot of business continuity conversations have been happening. That's a lot of the conversations that I've been having recently. There's definitely been a very big uptick in this use case over the last several weeks, months. And that is probably top of mind right now. As we look at this more holistically, though, call centers, bring your own device models, compliance requirements are another big one. If you're trying to meet compliance with having endpoints with data on them in the wild, that can be, one, hard to manage, potentially unsecure, and not meeting the compliance that you need there. So a lot of good use cases here. Time to provision being another big difference between on-premises VDI and Amazon Workspaces. Again, spin that environment up really quick. Pay-as-you-go model. Workspaces can be added in minutes. So if you do need to add on 10 more people, hundreds of more people, thousands of more people, immediately be able to do that. Very scalable in that perspective. And again, we're managing all the underlying components that working up the stack slide there. We're providing all of that patching and management and all that kind of good stuff. So you may say, all right, well, we already have an existing environment. Maybe we are already managing desktops in a certain way. We want to start working with this, but we also want to leverage our existing setup or infrastructure or tools. If you have your own intranet, this is something that you can access your intranet from. If you already have your users in Active Directory, you can use your existing. You need MFA, you can use that. If you're using SCCM or any application really management vendor out there, that's a possibility as well. And if you're using certificate authorities to authenticate your users, that's also a possibility. So with your existing environments, this is also something that plays very well together. All right, so getting into it a little bit. What do I need to build out an Amazon Workspaces environment? See on the left-hand side the needs. We have recommended and optional. For the first part of the needs, I'll call it the AWS foundational components. The networking, the access to an account, VPC design, all that kind of stuff, right? Even Active Directory. To go into that a little bit, there is Amazon Quick Starts. This is usually how I start an environment. So doing things like infrastructure as code, with CloudFormation. Being able to build this all out for you automatically is something that I like doing because it provides a consistent environment. So for any kind of new environment that you want to be set up is usually what I do for this, even with POCs and things like that. Go ahead and deploy the Quick Start. You can even have one that has our Active Directory inside of it, and that gets you primed for spinning up your Amazon Workspaces environment. You also need your Amazon Workspaces Client. So obviously your end users need to have that installed. There's also a web client version. Recommended going into connectivity back to on-premises or that MFA, and then optionally any of those application management tools. So it's high level what we need there.
Cool, Andrew. I'm going to back you up one slide for a second, if you don't mind. I just wanted to chime in on this. Mission has helped many customers out with deploying workspaces in the past, and the hardest part to me has always been making sure that the network infrastructure and underlying infrastructure that Workspaces is going to live on is configured properly and ready to scale. So there are things that Mission can help with here. If anybody needs assistance with this, this is what we do. We've built out these environments, again, using tools like what you were talking about with CloudFormation or Terraform or any other sort of infrastructure as code service. We've integrated MFA solutions with Okta in the past, so people want to use SSO for Okta and use their native push verification tools. It becomes really, really simple to work with and manage. We've done things like working with customers to help them build out different workspaces and different templates for a variety of different departments in the organization. So for example, some customers that we've worked with might have a marketing team and a finance team and a data science team that all have different needs for computing. And we've built out with them various different templatized images that can easily be deployed. And then we'll work with those customers to help make sure that they're maintained, make sure that they know how to deploy them, make sure that we can find tools to automate those deployments as well. So if there's an image update, we can use an orchestration tool like Jenkins to schedule when that deployment actually happens and when that image gets refreshed on workstation, on end user workspaces.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good information. Okay, yeah, so let's go into some of the network considerations for Amazon Workspaces, give you maybe a better idea of what this looks like from a technology perspective. Here you can see an example architecture we'll start with the client that in this example is shown on premises. That end user's machine, the client installed or web client, goes from, if you see the red line there, to the internet, and then to our authentication services. Typically there you're using required to use Active Directory, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here. But they get authenticated. The client then responds back, connects into their desktop, that using the PC over IP protocol to our streaming gateways, which you see in blue there, and then be able to manipulate the Amazon Workspace instance showed in the bottom right. That instance has two elastic network interfaces on it. One that's touching in on our managed services VPC, so we can provide that streaming gateway service to you. And then the other network interface is into your customer managed VPC or virtual private cloud. So that side is then able to communicate to applications that you may have deployed on AWS with inside of that account, or maybe a cross account through VPN, through a direct connect. Kind of the possibilities are almost limitless there, right? So that means getting back to your intranet sites or internal websites or backends of applications that your desktop needs access to. That whole piece is fit into there. Talking more about the authentication piece, Amazon Workspaces does require Active Directory, and we use an AD connector to communicate with that. In this example, it's showing that AD connector going across your VPC. You see the elastic network interface kind of in the center there. For that, communicating back into your network, and then maybe that Active Directory is sitting on premises, and that AD connector can proxy into that and provide that to the authentication service. There's a couple different ways how customers deploy this, though. Some people may not want to rely on that direct connect or VPN to have maybe there's stability issues or whatever it may be with that, or they don't want to rely on that. They can extend their Active Directory into the AWS VPC on EC2 instances by standing up the Active Directory on those EC2 instances and extending that existing Active Directory into AWS. That would be the kind of second option there. And the third being, we can provide our own AWS directory service, managed Active Directory, which is a native Microsoft Active Directory environment that we manage. So we do all of the patching, monitoring, maintenance, failovers, backups, you name it, for that environment. Typically what people do is we'll create a trust from that managed service that we provide onto on-premises Active Directory if required, but that is more of a standalone setup that we see our customers deploying. So hopefully that gave you kind of a rundown of what that looked like there. Let's go into some of the bundle management. So with Amazon Workspaces, once a user's workspace is deployed, you get that whole box. So you're talking about user data, the profile, their applications, the guest operating system, and a defined amount of compute resources. So once it's deployed, the end user may, if they have admin rights, be able to install applications or change their background or whatever they need to do, right? Before that environment is deployed, the creation of a bundle is very common. We provide kind of base level bundles or provided bundles that may include Microsoft Office inside of that bundle application. It may have some of your own custom applications if you're doing a custom environment there. So that bundle is created, and then the user's workspaces are created from that bundle. So kind of key understanding of how image management works with Amazon Workspaces. Another piece with bundle management is the ability to bring your own license and bring your own image. So if you have a requirement around using Windows 7 or Windows 10, the client operating system, this model is for you then. being able to potentially save on licensing costs, have a consistent user experience from maybe a physical laptop that they have and this desktop as a service, and potentially improving management of those images with the consistent tools that you may have there. One thing to note with Microsoft contracts, make sure that you communicate with Microsoft or check your license agreement with Microsoft for any of this. By default, we see that this is possible. There's requirements around dedicatedness in these environments, and that can vary. So this process has definitely also been improved on the Amazon Workspaces side of things. Our support team can help you get this process automated now to onboard those images. So another key thing I see a lot of users doing when that requirement is there. By default, Amazon Workspaces is providing the server operating system. All right. Now, the last piece here from the technical side on the different components here is the Workspaces Client. So you have the entire environment set up. You have Workspaces running. All your bundles are good to go. You're all set up. Now your end users are coming in. You have, in this case, an installed client on a machine. You'll get a registration code from Amazon Workspaces. You provide that to the end users, go through an email, typically. That end user enters in the registration code, username, password, possibly MFA, and they're able to connect into the desktop. The client also has the ability to have a network checker here to check the network. There is some ports that need to be open for PC over IP. You also can lock down, if you're concerned about that, to whitelist the PC over IP gateway network ranges from maybe if you're limiting that on premises or wherever this end user may be. So we can provide the link to that. But yeah, you get all greens on this and be able to connect in, and you're off and running with your desktop. All right, so hopefully that was informative. I'm going to pass it back to Jason to talk about this case study.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. All right, so AltaView. So we had worked with AltaView. Let me give you a little bit of background on them. They have a proprietary technology that enables unsurpassed biomarker detection and issue analysis. So they basically look at these really, really high resolution images, and those images historically had to be, all this analysis had to be done on premise inside their office. About 2 years ago, they came to us and they were like, all right, well, we want to get all of our resources out of our on-premise data center. We want to move it into AWS. So they did that, and then they realized shortly thereafter that opening these gigantic images, I mean, when I tell you gigantic images, these images can be several gigs in size, crazy high resolution, opening those across a VPN tunnel or across a direct connect link still just wasn't really efficient. So what we ended up working with them on is trying to find a way for them to get a fast, familiar interface for their users so that they could continue to access these applications and make it feel like they were inside their office no matter where they were. So the solution we provided was pretty simple. I'm dumbing this down for myself, I think, but the solution was really, I thought it was kind of elegant and it was simple at the same time. New VPCs were stood up, or a new VPC was stood up with a couple of subnets in it. Workspaces were deployed across those subnets. They had various different security groups inside the organization about who had access to what resources and where. So from a typical Windows administration standpoint, any group policies that were already set up are going to already be applied to those users and what they can gain access to. But ultimately, we gave them workspaces across multiple availability zones, multiple subnets. We determined that there were a handful of users that were not going to be needing access to workspaces or to work in this environment full-time. And then there were a lot of people that were going to be needing full-time access to these applications. And upon that discovery, as we were building out the environment, we we made the recommendation to the customer, like, all right, well, this can get expensive if you're going to do this on an hourly basis. There are options for workspaces with pricing to go either fixed fee or by the hour or pay as you go. So you can mix and match. So there could be some users that are kind of your fixed fee users. There were some users that we had set up to be pay-as-you-go users. We got everything squared away, and ultimately what we provided was, a familiar end user's, virtual desktop environment. So each user has a dedicated environment. When one user accesses that instance or that workspace, it doesn't impact anybody else. Like unlike a Windows remote desktop server where you might have multiple people sharing the same resource, these are unique and dedicated resources per user. We created a secure way for these workspaces to be accessed from anywhere for them. End users can be productive pretty much anywhere at all times. It doesn't really matter where they're located. And nowadays with COVID-19 pandemic that's happening, their feel of what they're analyzing data inside the office is no different than what they're doing when they're at home. We've enabled their IT staff to very easily manage these desktops because the requirements from an end user standpoint of what they're connecting from, as long as it can run a Workspaces client, it can connect. So the end user experience inside of Workspaces is managed just like you would manage anything else in a Windows environment. Again, they use group policy to deploy certain resources to the organization. There may be patch management tools that we have in place, et cetera. We can restore images at any given point. And finally, Mission was able to provide this solution in a very cost-friendly manner. I think I already explained this. That allowed each user to leverage the right-sized instance, leverage the right-size image, and determine whether or not there were going to be full-time, always-on users versus the casual user who might be pay-as-you-go. And this approach, when we did the analysis, reduced their cost by about 40%. That about does it for the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So I'd like to open up the Q&A from the audience. See a couple of questions out there already, so we can start by answering these. I think the first one that came in, Andrew, I might let you take this one, which was, user was asking that we mentioned Active Directory. Can Workspaces support other LDAP directories as well?
So the scenarios I was talking about, there is a need for using the AD connector and that communicating with Microsoft Active Directory. The other question I see here is, do you really need 5 VPCs? And actually, so in that diagram, I'm kind of showing you a little bit under the covers of what's going on in the background, right? So it's more around you having 1 VPC in your environment. That's all you really need. You do need 2 availability zones within that VPC. But the other ones that you might have seen in that diagram are really related to where the AWS managed services are for the authentication, for the streaming gateways listed in there.
Right, and I might even take that a step further in saying I think this answer really depends upon the size of your deployment. If you're talking, you're deploying to a small business with maybe 50 to 100 users, yeah, you can probably get away with 1 VPC for that in a couple of different availability zones. If you're talking large enterprise deployment, I would probably dedicate that to multiple VPCs and have that rolled out and follow a larger scale infrastructure to break things out. All right. I think the next question we got, let me just scroll to the list here, was how does authentication work? I'm going to let you answer that one. I think you may be able to handle that one a little bit better than I can, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. So Active Directory is required, right? So that's where your users would sit. The authentication piece is, again, it's our managed authentication service that is really what you'd be interacting with there. From really an end user perspective, right? So the end user has their username and password, and the client connects into that authentication gateway. You could possibly have a radius, multi-factor authentication configured onto that as well. And it goes into Active Directory and checks, checks, to see if there's access within inside of that for that user and provisions that access out. I can go a little bit further in depth too about from the machine perspective and how the machine is authenticating with Active Directory using Kerberos. But that might be some documentation we can send you after the call. But in short, the two different pieces are the client connecting to Active Directory, the actual the Microsoft operating system provided by Amazon Workspaces communicating with Active Directory, and then our service communicating with that Active Directory.
Awesome. All right. So the next question we got in here is, how do I create a custom image? I'm going to start on that one, and I'll let you fill in the blanks if you want to do that. So
Sure.
I always start with a template. So start with the template blank OS. When we first set up a workspace for any customer, the idea is make sure that you can access your basic resources first. Make sure you can log in, that you have no problem authenticating, that you can see network resources that you expect to be able to see. Once you've done that, load up your applications as if you were loading up a brand new Windows desktop, right? So if you need to install Microsoft Office, if you've got an Office 365 license, for example, you might want to install that first. If you've got some custom applications, go ahead and install all of that stuff. Once that's done, it's really as simple as taking an image in the management console. There's a log. You click over into the Workspaces console in AWS, click a little button that says Create Image. It'll take about follows a process that does something very similar to doing a sysprep. So it will effectively take an hour or two, depending on the size of the resource that you're running. But it will take a full image of that system. It'll sysprep it for you. It'll copy all of your default user profile settings over to whatever resource you deploy it to. And then you can create and add that resource or add that image into a specific bundle. In other words, take the custom image that you had and create a bundle from it, meaning you may want to be deploying that to power users that may get more CPU or more memory than your standard users, or however you want to deploy this. You can configure the back-end, the compute resources that go along with that image pretty easily. All right. Specific requirements. What are the specific requirements surrounding BYOL, bring your own license? Andrew, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, there are a handful. Again, I'll say with Microsoft licensing, check with your Microsoft rep there on some of the requirements. But at least from the AWS perspective, we do have a requirement for 200 desktops to be used within a single region at any given time. And that's because we do see that these are environments that need to have dedicated hosts associated with them, typically. It's really where the requirement comes from there. And that is something that we are not able to say provide the Windows 7 and 10 images. So there's a process to import that image.
Excellent. All right. I saw two backup questions in here, so I'm going to try to bundle these two together. So one of them was, does the customer in our case study, do they use EBS snapshots to back up workstations or some workstation backup technology like Veeam? Workspaces, it sits in the back end. You're never going to see it this way, but it lives on EC2 instances. And backups, so the way they're built, let me back up for a second here. The way they're built, the operating system gets in a Windows case, a C drive. And the user profiles are all loaded to a different EBS volume, a D drive. That data volume, or that D drive, that volume gets backed up and snapshotted every 12 hours. That gets done automatically by Workspaces, by AWS. So you can restore that volume from the last backup at any point in time. As for specific backup technology like Veeam, I have not seen that in use in the past. Andrew, I don't know if you have, It doesn't seem like something that I would want to try, but
yeah, I would recommend, that layered approach, right? When I was talking about the bundle management, from a snapshot perspective and what's on the operating system, usually snapshots are good there. I will say, though, if you have a very large, say, file system, shared folder, CIFS, SMB, file share kind of system there, that kind of lives outside of the workspace, but that environment, you probably want to have some sort of file-level backup system in place. Typically for our customers, the snapshots work perfectly well.
Right. So I think kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, I think you're referring more to if a user is accessing data on a file server somewhere and that file server is being backed up separately, yes, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So the data volume on the user data on the workspace itself is only backed up once every 12 hours. All right. Let me go mark off the other one there. One of the questions was, does Windows-based Workspace run on the Windows server or desktop platform? Much like what Andrew was just explaining, by default, it will run on a Windows server platform. It also runs on Linux, so you can get Linux desktops if you'd like. If you do want to use, so it'll run the Windows, in the Windows world, it's running on Windows with the user desktop experience functionality enabled. If you do want it to run on a desktop operating system such as Windows 10, you would need to have an enterprise license agreement and provide that image to AWS before that can be enabled. All right, next question we got is, what devices can I run the Workspaces client on? There's actually a multitude of them, and this is what's pretty amazing, right? So in the BYOL, or bring your own computer, really, space. In this case, many businesses have opted to just tell people to log in from their home computer, because ultimately your home computer is really just functioning as something that's transmitting keystrokes and mouse movements, and in return you're getting a video signal. If you dumb it down that way, you can run Workspaces clients on Windows, on an iPad, Mac OS X, Android, Chromebooks, Fire tablets, Linux-based clients, and there's even a browser-based client as well. All of it has the same type of security built in. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's even zero client options as well. So the vendors out there like that support PC over IP, typically, as well as replacement endpoint providers like iGel.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about what devices, what OSs does it run, and multiple monitors supported. Multiple monitors are supported in Workspaces. It will assume whatever configuration you have set up. So if you've got 3 monitors on your workspace or on your desktop, and you go and launch Workspaces, you can either have it contained to a single desktop or a single screen, or you can go into full screen mode, which will assume, all 3 screens that you're connected to in the same configuration. All right. Can we bring your own license for antivirus endpoints? You want to take this one, sir?
Sure. Yeah. So again, I don't have an extensive list of all the vendors out there and what their license contracts are, so definitely check with that. I have not seen that as a problem in the past. We do, with one of our bundles, supply trend antivirus, so that might be an option for you as well. But I would say check with that antivirus vendor to see with their license first, and most likely I don't see any issues with that, but it's always good to check with them because that relationship's directly between you and that vendor.
Awesome. All right, one last question is, how is Amazon multi-cloud feature enabling security and remote workforce? you want to take this one, Andrew, or are you?
I'm not quite sure what that means. I would probably need clarification on what's being asked, but
I'm not 100% sure what we're looking for here either. What I can tell you is security is going to be configured from on the networking side of your workspace, right? So if you want to enable multi-factor authentication, you'll need a Radius server in place. That Radius server can handle whatever MFA solution you want to use. So it doesn't matter from a client standpoint what type of client you're connecting from. Personally, I'm a Mac user. There's a Mac client. If I have MFA enabled, it's going to ask me for that MFA token prior to me even logging in. So it's going to ask me my username, my password, and that MFA token before I can even press enter and pass my credentials through for validation. I'm not positive what else might be looking for. So if that user is still in the audience asking that question and you can provide some clarification, I'd love to see it.
I would say, though, that just in general here with this use case, ideally, and this has been something that's been talked about for so long, is being able to move everything to SaaS applications, and that world really doesn't exist, right? So there is a multitude of desktop applications that are out there that make businesses work. This is how remote workforces get their business done. Being able to have a secure, reliable, performant desktop, providing these desktop applications out to the end users is what's being provided here.
Awesome. I think that was all of the questions that we had, so I'll move forward here. I think that really wraps it up for today, folks. If you do have questions, you can certainly reach out to sales@missioncloud.com. We'll give you a 1-hour consulting session. We can check out our new instant discount program. You can learn how to save 5% on your AWS bill immediately, and as much as up to 20% with your new team of cloud analysts at pages.missioncloud.com/lower-your-AWS-costs. I think that's it. So Andrew, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody for participating.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Bye-bye.